Now, what happens when someone who is contaminated runs into someone who is not? They both have an agenda. Someone who has suffered a trauma says to someone who has not, let me tell you how things are. But someone who hasn't suffered the trauma says, that may be so, but there is also this other approach. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, once had said that it is much easier to teach a Muslim how to be a Christian than to teach a Christian how to be a Christian. If you have come from having parents who were not present in your life, it's going to be so difficult for anyone to convince you that there are parents out there who actually care. If you have been scarred by love, it's going to be so difficult to convince you that you can actually be in relationships that will nourish you. Because you have been jaded. You have poison inside you. So what happens when the innocent tries to transform someone who has toxins? Well, the book tells us. You wrestle, you fight. We call it the dialectic. You go back and forth. I have no idea, some of you in this class have gone to YouTube and listened to the dream speech. It's not very organic, but it's good for what it is. I have no doubt that you have listened to some New Age gurus and they inspired you. But eventually you walk away and you will forget. The wrestling that takes place between Enkidu and Gilgamesh. You know what happens when you wrestle someone? You spend time with them. Your bodies grind against each other. Your minds grind against each other. Do you know what happens when you spend time with anyone or anything? They grow on you. For 6 days and 6 nights, Enkidu and Gilgamesh wrestle. Imagine what would happen if you were to come to my office before class, and then you come to class, and then you come to my office after class, and then you say, Amir, do you mind if I come over for dinner? What's going to happen to you? Should you spend a lot of time with me? Well, you begin to look at life like me, think like me, speak like me. Your mannerism will be like me. I will grow on you. Should you want to spend a good amount of time with Snoop Dogg? Well, how are you going to grow? Well, you come to class with a foot-long joint in your hands. Wrestle with the right people. If there are no people in your life, wrestle with the right books. Now, they have wrestled so much that something really interesting has happened. Gilgamesh finds himself in love with Enkidu. Imagine that. 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 1,000 years ago, a man falling in love with another man. Poison falling in love with its remedy. For those of you who know this man, Saul of Tarsus, you guys know who Saul is? A few years after, supposedly after the death of Jay-Z, Jesus Christ, Saul is commissioned by the government to go travel around and kill the new converts. His name is Saul. And if you're familiar with the Hebrew language or the Hebrew alphabet, S or sin in Hebrew means poison, basically. As he is walking, he has a vision. He sees Jesus. Jesus looks at him and says, yo, dude, what be happening? Where thou is going? Why you be going around killing my people? You ain't got no shame to you? And Saul says, I apologize. And from that point on, his name changes from Saul to Paul. Pe in the Hebrew alphabet means spokesperson. Now he carries the cross like Jesus. You know, Paul, he wrote 15 books of the 27 books of the New Testament. Some guy who had never seen Jesus, except in a vision. What happens when you fall in love with someone? Now, the thing about falling in love you need to understand is the following. And let this be a lesson to you young kids. When you're young, you're just carrying your physical body around. That's what you do. Sure, you have some pathetic little ideas about this and that, but for the most part, you're all flesh and no spirit. So you can love when you're 18, but you gravitate towards a body that looks good, smells good, tastes good. When you run into an Angelina Jolie or a Beyonce, are they attractive? Absolutely. Do their physical beauty generate emotions and thoughts? Definitely. But this is the foundation of your love. How long do you think it's going to take before you fall out of that? All right, so you're 18, you've fallen in love with someone because they look good. You know, it's a party, the lights are dim, you can't see anything. And so you take them home, and you're in luck because the sun is never going to rise for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. You live in the dark, consumed by the passions of the flesh. All right, so you're young. What do? You have sex. How much? 5, 10, 15 hours a day? Fine, good for you. How long do you think is that going to last? 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, maybe 2 weeks if you're lucky? Eventually what? Remember what we said, we are restless at our very core. At a certain point, you look at your companion and say, let's go to a coffee shop, grab ourselves some drinks, have a conversation. You realize inside this body houses no reflection. Little by little, what was deemed to be beauty turns into ugliness and deformity. You can't love someone's emotions. I know almost all of you in this class have exploited other people. You take him out for a coffee and you say, let me tell you what my parents did to me. I'm taking this philosophy class and it's making me sad. And when I'm sad, A, B, C, D happens to me. And this other poor chap's that's sitting across you. Oh, tell me more, tell me more. Have you listened to Eckhart Tolle, they say to you? Oh, he is great. And you say, how are they great? Because he's like a stoic, you know. He says emotions come and go. And all of a sudden you realize something. You enjoy hanging out with sad people because you are their Messiah. They ooze out all the shit and you swallow it. And then in the form of an idea, you offer them flowers as ideas. right? Do this and your life will be better. Do that and your life will be better. How much do you think you can eat this crap before you begin to throw up? After a while, even you. Remember, even Jesus Christ in the garden said, you know what? This is too much, man. People are way too stupid. I didn't sign up for this. Let this guy pass by me. At a certain point, you're going to say, as you're walking home, you know, I love Johnny, but he keeps talking about the same story day after day after day after day. That which was new and exciting now is boring and painful. And so you look for a way out. If you could love in this realm for about 6 months, that's how long it usually takes for you to find a way out. You fell in love quickly, now you fall out. Here, you realize you can only deal with sad people, not happy people. Sad people express, you listen, and they make you into a messiah. After a while, the sad person says, oh, he keeps telling me the same thing. And the Messiah says, oh, she keeps telling me the same thing. So you fell in love, they loved you back, but after about 2 years, you realize you can't swallow this crap anymore. Then you find someone who's an intellectual. Oh, he's read so many books. When we go to a coffee shop and we sit, I ask him this and I ask him that, and he talks to me about these ideas in ways I have never ever experienced. He or she is like this well of wisdom that has no bottom. When I was very, very young, I worked with this man named Jiddu Krishnamurti. I visited him, spent about 2 years, and then I went and bought all the books that he had ever written, people had ever written about him. I still have them, about 100. It took me about 10 years to realize, oh man, this guy keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again. How long is this love going to last? About 10 years. If you are a believer that there is this thing called the spiritual part inside the human being, remember Gilgamesh is part man, part God. You could also fall in love with the spirit. Socrates has the daemon inside him. He has two components. He has love inside him, and he has wisdom inside him. This is the love for wisdom. It's not love of the body. It's not love of pathetic emotions. It's not love of someone who simply has a lot of information in their head. We don't know where wisdom comes from. And we don't really know how to create a love that's geared towards wisdom. Do you have any questions? Allahu Akbar.
How long does the spirit last?
Oh, man. Here is Jamal. Sad face. Here is Socrates. Why is Jamal so big and Socrates so small? Because good teachers are always invisible. Ordinary people always overestimate and overvalue themselves. Their ego is huge. And it's because they're stupid. It's not their fault though. Now, when you look at Socrates, what do you see? An ugly human being. Now, ugliness can be in two ways. He was, from what history tells us, physically he was ugly. In a dark alley, it's nighttime. Ray is walking with his companion with a cup of coffee. She's drinking Americana. And they look to the right, and there is this man. But he doesn't look like a man, he looks like a beast. So ugly was Socrates that Ray and his companions run. That's what history tells us about how unattractive Socrates was. You're going to look at the other aspect of unattractiveness is the following. You know, as long as Malcolm X demonized white people, Elijah Muhammad's people liked them. His ideas were attractive. You know why? Because they believed the same way that Malcolm did. But Malcolm soon became unattractive to them. You know why? Like Jesus, he said, anyone who finds my table and desires to sit at my table and eat the food that I make, welcome. And that didn't go well. So someone could be unattractive physically and someone could be unattractive intellectually because their ideas don't match yours. Okay? Do you know how long it's going to take you to be able to sit physically next to Socrates, knowing full well every time you look at his face, you're about to throw up? That's how ugly he is. If this is a little difficult to grasp, go out today around the lake. Find someone who has not been blessed or graced with good looks. I mean, all of us are mediocre looking, but go out there, look for someone who is hideous looking. And go to them and say, would you like to have a cup of coffee? And while you're having coffee with them, keep looking at them. But make sure they are very, very, very unattractive. If that's a little too challenging for you, go to a friend's house whom you know to be a slob. Their house smells, they got 50 cats and 25 dogs. They haven't done laundry for like 5 or 6 years. Pizza boxes are everywhere. Everything about the space smells. Go on there and sit. See how much of it you can tolerate. Now, let's say you're able to tolerate the physical presence of Socrates. Okay? Inside the physical body of Socrates lives a set of emotions. And you can see that, feel that, just by the way he sits. He doesn't have to talk. There is something about his physical body that has like magnetic qualities. Okay? Grab a magnet and a few paper clips. The paper clips don't need to know the magnet. All that the paper clip will feel is that slowly they are moving towards the magnet. That is magic. Socrates has magic in him, man. Okay? Now, His mouth begins to open, Socrates' mouth. Okay? Now he has words coming out of his mouth. These words enter your ears. Okay? Now you're a Christian. He is a pagan. But the way he uses words, the way he speaks, what he speaks about, generates a set of emotions inside you. They inspire you. They're turning you into a Pegasus. Okay? Your life is very linear. You wake up at 5, you shower, you dress, you make breakfast, you come to school, you take notes, you go to work, you're good to your customers, you go home, you shower, you watch 10 minutes of TV, you cook, you clean up, you do schoolwork. Very organized. Socrates makes you feel something uncommon. It's inspiring. It's also frightening. You want to go home to do schoolwork, but your emotions say, stay. Now, you're going to wrestle very much like Gilgamesh and Enkidu. You are a creature of city. You got work to do. Socrates creates innocence about you. And there is now this, what we call in Islam, Jihadul Akbar. There is this battle inside you. Should I stay, risking a potential F on my test in the morning, or should I go? If I go, my wings will be clipped. I'll go do math. I'll forget Socrates. If I stay, my wings will grow larger and larger. I'll fly higher and higher. But I will get an F. Which one do you want? Okay? Now, most of the things that he says you will never, ever understand. It's like Thomas. He asks a great question. Why do people fear being forgotten once they die? Great question. He just doesn't understand what he's talking about. He puts the words together really well. There is just zero understanding. If he understood, he would have never spoken those words in the presence of Ray or myself. He would have shame. I mean, who in this class would go to their 90-year-old grandmother and say, oh, let's talk about death? Are you kidding? She's been thinking about that for the past 60 years, man. Shut your mouth. At a certain age, you have no choice but to evaluate your life and find it what? Completely hollow and cheap. You come to class as a 20-year-old? I have a question. Yes? I don't have a problem dying and being forgotten. Yeah, you're 20. Fuck. Now, there comes a point where Socrates, now remember, you've been around Socrates for about, let's just say 2 years now. He doesn't want you to understand anything because he knows you're not there yet. What he wants to do is contaminate you with inspiration. Now, here's the thing you need to understand. Socrates is monogamous. He doesn't want you hanging out with anyone else. He wants you all to himself. Why? He wants the inspiration he injected inside you to remain protected, intact. So when you go to him and say, oh, by the way, I read Karl Marx. Who told you to read Karl Marx, you idiot? Okay, should I read Heidegger? No. How about Kierkegaard? No. Well, who should I read? You just read me. There comes a point where, now remember, here is the body, inspiration is emotions. There comes a point where he talks, but something has happened to the world of emotions. They're no longer as intense. And there is a reason. Now he wants you to understand what he is talking about. For those of you in this class who have read, I don't know which gospel it's in, but there comes a point where Peter goes to Jesus and says, or, Jesus says to Peter, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to be tried, and I'm going to be found guilty, and I'm going to be crucified. And Peter says, oh no, that can't happen. You're the Messiah. You are part of the old tradition, the Jewish tradition. Messiahs are not tried. Messiahs are not found guilty. Messiahs are like King David. They're there to transform society. That's your job. And you're telling me you're going to go there, be found like a criminal and crucified? No. And you know what Jesus says to Peter? Satan lives inside you. Leave me. And what this means is this. Peter is inspired enough to follow Jesus. He just doesn't understand him. So there is this huge gap between feeling and understanding. I have had students for 20 years, 25 years. They feel intensely. They just don't understand things. It's not their fault. Because no one can give anyone understanding. Yeah. That's at a very, very later stage. The only way you can understand anything. Imagine that I am your father. And imagine now I am your alcoholic father. And because I consume too much alcohol, imagine now I am your abusive alcoholic father. I am abusive verbally, emotionally, and physically. Well, I'm a man. Now, how old are you? 2. I begin my experiment on you. You have no choice but to suffer under my wings. You're now 10. You're now 20. You don't have the capacity to understand. You certainly do, as an animal, have the capacity to feel. What I have done for you is I've generated this trauma that now lives inside you. Every time a man walks into your space, they could potentially harass you, hurt you, destroy you, bring pain to you. You have never tried to understand me because you've been preoccupied in trying to figure out what to do with all the feelings that live inside you, how to manage your relationships. You go to therapy, you do medication. There comes a point where you say to yourself, I am tired of feeling this way. It's not going to happen at the age of 2 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40. I don't know at what age people get to this place. But there comes a stage where you say, I hate feeling this way all the time. Everything I touch just dies. Then you go to therapy. And for the first time, you begin to express your emotions through words, and it won't go well because that hasn't been your occupation. You feel, and when you use words, lots of emotions in your words. Now, the therapist, if he or she is any good, they have to diffuse, remove the emotions from your language. And little by little, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, it'll take you to kind of speak without emotions. Because as long as you have emotions, you're drunk. And as long as you're drunk, you can't drive straight. You can't see straight. There comes a point where you are cut from your emotions. Here is Shanti, filled with trauma. Here is Shanti, baptized, where she is able to stand outside and look at what lives inside her. And then take this emotion out, dissect it, see what's inside. Now, by the time you get to the space, me, as your abusive, alcoholic father, I have passed. But you saw something about me, which was every night I would go home and I would write in my tiny little journal. You go to my funeral, then you go home, you shed a few tears, you unlock my room, and there are 10 volumes of all the things I've written. And you start with the first one. And in it, you read how my grandfather abused me, and then how my own father abused me, and how I got married at a very young age, not because I wanted to, but because I had you. And I stayed in the marriage, and I suffered in the marriage. And my only way out was to drink, to be numb, to forget. And eventually, I became addicted. That was the only way I could numb the pain. You suffered. And now you say, oh my God, my father went through the same stuff. And something about you will change. Now you have empathy. Now you have compassion. But that's a burden that you have to carry, because not only do you have to carry your own emotions, you also have to carry me. A father who's passed. And if you're lucky, before you yourself are dead, you will have enough objectivity, enough detachment from your own self to be able to look at yourself, your emotions, me. You will forgive me, but not because you're inspired, but because you understand. And by the time you understand, you no longer need books. You've become well versed in the art of observation, detachment, standing far away, looking at something and being able to process it well. It's about 50 years if you're lucky. But going back to Muhammad's question about love, the only way you can do this is through love. And when we come back here today's Thursday? When we come back here on Thursday, ask me about love and the sort of love that we need to have for it to be transformative in a healthy way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Adios, yes.